They never asked for attention, yet somehow the room bends toward them. Not the loudest, not the most colorful, but the most unsettlingly present. This video decodes the hidden psychology behind women who wear neutral colors and why their silence in style often signals something far more dangerous: control. You'll understand how aesthetic invisibility becomes a form of power, why stepping out of visual competition elevates perceived status, and how a neutral wardrobe can quietly rewire the way people see, judge, and respond to you. Because the truth is, when a woman stops trying to be seen, she starts becoming impossible to ignore. Stay until the end. What you're about to discover will change how you read presence, power, and perception forever. There is a quiet pattern most people overlook: the woman who steps into a room without announcing herself. No loud colors, no visual noise, yet something about her feels composed, intentional, almost untouchable. And what appears simple on the surface is rarely simple underneath. Because in psychology, when someone consistently removes stimuli instead of adding it, it is almost never an accident. It is design. What you are about to understand is not about fashion. It is about perception engineering. Why some women deliberately reduce their visual signal, and how that subtle decision reshapes how the world reacts to them. Most people dress to be seen. That's the baseline instinct. Visibility equals validation. Bright colors, bold patterns, constant variation, all of it feeds a very primitive loop in the brain. Notice me, interpret me, respond to me. But here's where it becomes interesting. High-awareness individuals often begin to reverse this loop. Instead of maximizing attention, they begin controlling it. And control always beats attraction. Because when a woman chooses neutral colors consistently, beige, cream, black, charcoal, she is doing something psychologically sophisticated. She is reducing cognitive entry points. The fewer visual signals you give people, the fewer assumptions they can make about you, and the fewer assumptions they can make, the more mental effort they invest trying to understand you. Effort creates value. This is not theory. It aligns with what cognitive psychology describes as processing fluency. The easier something is to process, the faster the brain categorizes it and moves on. Bright, expressive appearances are processed quickly, labeled quickly, and often dismissed just as quickly. But when visual information is minimal, the brain slows down. It searches. It becomes curious. And curiosity is a far more powerful hook than attraction. Now notice the shift. Instead of competing for attention, she becomes the subject of attention, without asking for it. There's also a deeper layer, one that connects to emotional regulation. A consistent neutral palette reduces daily decision-making. It removes micro-stress from the system. And while that sounds small, research in behavioral science shows that repeated minor decisions throughout the day drain cognitive resources, a phenomenon known as decision fatigue, which means, by simplifying something as basic as clothing, she is preserving mental energy for higher-level thinking, judgment, communication, strategy. This is where presence begins to change. Because people can sense when someone is not mentally scattered, when someone is not seeking approval, when someone is internally anchored, and that signal is far stronger than any visual statement. Another detail most overlook: neutral dressing shifts the focus from appearance to behavior. When there is nothing loud to look at, people start listening more carefully, observing more deeply, interpreting tone, words, timing. In other words, she moves the interaction from surface-level perception to psychological perception, and that is where influence actually lives. Interestingly, this pattern has been observed across different domains, not just individuals, but environments. Studies in environmental psychology show that low stimulation settings, muted colors, minimal contrast, reduce anxiety, increase focus, and create a sense of control. When someone dresses in alignment with that environment, they carry that same effect with them. They become a calming center in a chaotic space. Now here's the paradox. What looks like invisibility is often the strongest form of distinction. In a world saturated with overstimulation, fast content, bright visuals, constant noise, the absence of intensity becomes rare. And rarity always attracts attention, but not in a desperate way, in a magnetic way. There is also a social dimension to this. Over time, people begin associating consistency with identity. When someone's appearance is stable, predictable, and intentional, it signals discipline, and discipline is subconsciously linked to competence, not because of what she wears, but because of what it implies. And this is where the idea of quiet power becomes real, not as a concept, but as a behavioral pattern. No need to dominate visually, no need to compete for space, just a steady, controlled presence that does not fluctuate with trends or external expectations, which leads to another important shift: detachment from external validation. When appearance stops being a tool for approval, it becomes a tool for alignment. Alignment with identity, priorities, and internal standards. That's when confidence changes form. It becomes less expressive and more grounded. And here's something subtle but powerful. When people cannot easily read you, they become more cautious around you, not out of fear, but out of uncertainty. And uncertainty increases respect, because the brain treats unknown variables carefully. So instead of being quickly understood, she becomes carefully observed, and that changes the entire dynamic. At this point, it's worth anchoring this with something concrete. Research published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology has shown that when visual stimuli are reduced, individuals are perceived as more competent and more authoritative, simply because observers project depth where information is limited. The brain fills the gaps, often in a way that elevates the person being observed, which means minimalism does not just simplify appearance, it amplifies perceived substance. Now step back for a moment and look at the bigger picture. This is not about copying a style. It's about understanding a principle. The less you demand attention, the more intentional your presence becomes. The less you explain yourself visually, the more others invest in understanding you. And investment is the foundation of influence. There is also a psychological boundary being set here, one that is rarely spoken about. By not engaging in visual competition, she is signaling that her value does not depend on being compared. She steps carriage the unspoken hierarchy of who stands out more, and enters a different space entirely. A space where presence is not negotiated, it is established, and that shift is felt. Because people are highly sensitive to internal states, even when they cannot articulate them. They notice who is trying and who is simply being, who is performing and who is composed. And over time they gravitate toward the latter, not because it is louder, but because it is clearer. So when you see a woman consistently choosing neutral colors, understand that you are not just seeing a preference. You are seeing a strategy, a refinement process, a decision to remove excess in order to strengthen essence. And that is a very different level of awareness. By now, something should be clicking. The power here is not in the colors themselves. It is in what they remove, what they protect, and what they reveal indirectly. They remove noise, they protect focus, they reveal control. And in a world where most signals are exaggerated, control becomes unforgettable. So the next time you notice that quiet presence, the one that doesn't compete, doesn't chase attention, doesn't overwhelm the senses, pay closer attention. Because the strongest signals are often the ones that don't look like signals at all. And the woman who understands that is never truly invisible. Now, something revealing will appear on your screen. Why the modern woman is quietly abandoning young men for older. Watch till the end, and don't forget to like and subscribe.